hand me a microphone. Jim goes away, and Hyde comes out.
Jim Carrey didn't say this as a metaphor. He said it as a confession. Long before the interviews, before the awakening, before the silence. Jim learned something early on, that becoming someone else could feel safer than being himself. Comedy wasn't just a career, it was a disguise, and for decades the disguise worked, yet the louder the laughter, the quieter the man inside became. Eventually, the character didn't need him at all. This isn't a story about fame or burnout. It's about what happens when a mask stops being a performance and becomes an identity. Because when the mask finally falls, the real question isn't what was lost. It's this. Who are you when the role you've been playing disappears? In our last video, we walked to the edge of the cliff with Jim Carrey. We looked at the terrifying realization that the self we've spent our whole lives building might not actually exist. We felt the weight of that void, the depersonalization, the unreality, the fear that nothing matters. But if you stay in that void, you only get half the story. You get the tragedy of losing yourself without the miracle of finding what's underneath. Jim Carrey didn't just lose his mind playing Andy Kaufman. He lost the barrier between himself and the rest of the world, and once the dust settled, he didn't find emptiness. He found freedom.
I find it all so abstract. Why am I Canadian? What is that? What does that mean?
To understand the freedom, we have to understand how he got there. It started with surrender. When Jim Carrey took the role of Andy Kaufman, he didn't just act. He stepped out of the way completely. He admitted that Jim wasn't capable of doing this. He physically and mentally moved his ego aside. And what happened next is the key to everything. He waited. He didn't try to be Andy. He waited for Andy to show up. This is the moment of spiritual surrender. In many traditions, this is described as letting go and letting God, or effortless action. Jim stopped driving the car, and the moment he took his hands off the wheel, something else took over. For months, Jim Carrey didn't exist. He surrendered his volition. And while to the outside world this looked like method acting gone wrong, for Jim, it was a glimpse into a terrifying truth. Life happens without a you needing to control it. But surrender isn't peaceful at first. It's destructive. When you stop being yourself, you start to realize how much of your life was just a performance. Jim began to see that his entire identity, the famous comedian, the movie star, the nice guy, was just a suit he wore.
Oh no, be the other guy. You told us you were this guy. You know, no one can live with that forever.
He was Andy. He was Tony. He was everyone and no one. The lines blurred, and when the movie ended, the real crisis began. If he could be Andy so perfectly that Andy's own family hugged him and cried, then what was Jim Carrey? Was Jim just another character he had been playing for 30 years? This is the dark side we talked about in the last video. The abyss. When the mask falls off and there's no face underneath. He was looking for himself, but he couldn't find Jim anymore. The structure had collapsed. But here is the shift. Here is the third stage. Once you realize you are a character, you stop taking the character's problems so seriously. If Jim is just a construct, then Jim's failures, Jim's sadness, and Jim's fears are just part of the script. They aren't you. He realized he had spent his life operating out of fear. Fear of losing the character, fear of not being the movie star. But once the character died, the fear died with it. This brings us to one of the most profound realizations in the documentary.
The fruition of all of my dreams and be unhappy.
He had effectively won the game of life. He was one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood and enjoyed universal adoration. Yet, in the quiet moments behind the closed doors, he faced a stark truth. It meant nothing. The accolades were just noise. The money was just paper. While this sounds like a descent into nihilism, it is actually a doorway to enlightenment. As long as you believe the prize at the finish line will make you whole, you are trapped in the race. But the moment you realize the prize is hollow, the race loses its power over you. You can stop running, you can step off the treadmill of constant becoming and rest in the state of being. This was his transition from ego to presence. He abandoned the fragile identity of Jim Carrey, the construct that required constant validation and success to survive. In its place, he found the observer. He realized he didn't need to be the funny man. He simply needed to exist. He shifted his awareness from the turbulence of the personality to the calm of the soul, declaring, "I am the space in which Jim Carrey happens." So, what do you do when you realize you don't exist? The answer is simple. You create. There is a misconception that spiritual awakening requires passivity, that you must denounce the world and live in a cave. Jim proved otherwise. He didn't stop doing. He changed why he was doing. He started making art from the void rather than from the ego. He understood that the entity known as Jim Carrey was just a construct, a vessel through which creativity could flow. This is the delicate art of integration. The goal isn't to kill the ego. The goal is to see the ego for what it is, a tool, a costume. You keep the costume because it allows you to interact with reality. You use the character to paint, to tell jokes, and to experience love. But the suffering vanishes because the attachment is gone. You are fully engaged in the play of life, yet you remain the observer, never again confusing the actor with the role. He is no longer Jim Carrey. That label is just a costume hanging in the closet. He is now the consciousness experiencing Jim Carrey, and in that shift, he found total freedom. We often recoil from the dark side of awakening because it feels like a funeral. It is dark only because it ruthlessly kills the lies we love the most. It kills our need to be special. It extinguishes the main character energy we use to validate our existence. It feels like dying because, to the ego, it is death. But on the other side of that ego death lies the great beyond. This is the place where the illusion of separation dissolves. You realize that you never were the wave crashing frantically against the shore. You were always the ocean itself, vast, deep, and unhurt by the surface turbulence. Jim warned us about the darkness not to scare us, but to encourage us to walk through the fire. He knows that the only thing burning is the false self. On the other side is the only thing that is real. And perhaps that is our only true purpose here, to fully participate in the illusion, to play our roles with passion. And then, when the great director finally yells, "Cut," to simply wipe off the makeup and walk away.